Title: The Nightmare Motel That Traps Guests in Their Own Memories. A motel is sometimes less a place and more a feeling, a pause between one part of a life and the next. But what happens when the pause becomes permanent? When the room you rent for a night decides to keep you? When it learns the memories you've spent a lifetime trying to forget and asks you to live them again? This is a story about a place like that. A place that a man named Alex found one night, when the road behind him had finally become longer than the road ahead. The life Alex left behind hadn't so much collapsed as it had quietly dissolved. A business, a relationship, a series of choices that had worn him down to a whisper. So he packed what was left into a single bag, filled his tank with gas, and just drove. There was no destination, only the need to see a different version of himself in the reflection of a rearview mirror. He'd been pushing west for 2 days, the state lines blurring into one another through a haze of diner coffee and profound exhaustion. The sun was bleeding its last light over the flat, empty horizon when the engine began to sputter. He coasted, the silence growing louder, until the car rolled to a stop in the gravel lot of the only structure he'd seen for 100 miles. A motel. It wasn't just old, it was an afterthought. The neon sign, a ghost of a starburst, had letters missing. So it read simply, Starlight OL. A single bulb over the office door flickered, casting shadows that danced like living things. There was one other car in the lot, a sedan from another era, covered in a film of dust so thick it looked like it had grown there. A sense of deep, unnatural isolation pressed in on him, the kind of quiet that feels like a pocket of forgotten time, completely severed from the world. Every instinct told him to risk the empty highway, to sleep in his car until morning. But the exhaustion was a physical weight in his bones. He needed rest. The office was empty. A small bell sat on the counter next to a heavy, leather-bound guest book, whose pages were yellowed and brittle. He tapped the bell. The sound was sharp, almost violent in the silence. After a moment that stretched too long, a door behind the counter sighed open, and an old man emerged. He was impossibly thin, his skin like old parchment. He didn't speak. He just pushed the guest book forward. Alex signed his name, paid with the cash he had, and the man passed him a key on a heavy brass tag. Room 7. The room was a continuation of the stillness outside. The bedspread was a faded floral, the carpet worn down to its threads and pathways etched by strangers. The air was heavy with the smell of dust and something else, something metallic and vaguely sad, like old, forgotten tools. The only window looked out onto a solid brick wall. It was a box made for forgetting. Alex slid the chain across the door, the sound of it loud and final, and fell onto the bed without taking off his clothes. Sleep found him instantly, but it wasn't the peace he was looking for. Alex woke up to a darkness that felt different, deeper. His heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He couldn't name what had woken him. Maybe a sound from a dream that had followed him out. He sat up, swinging his legs over the edge of the bed, and his feet met the floor. It was wrong. Not the scratchy, worn carpet he expected, but cool, slick concrete. And it was damp. His fingers fumbled in the dark for the lamp, tracing its shape until he found the switch. A weak, yellow light filled the room. He looked down. The floor was dark with moisture, and the air, once just dusty, was now thick with the chemical bite of chlorine. It was the smell of the town pool from his childhood. The smell of the summer he turned 8, the summer his friend Mark held his head under the water just a few seconds too long. the burning in his lungs, the sheer, blind panic of it. He shook his head, a slow, disbelieving motion. A plumbing issue, he told himself. A leak. He stood up, the cold concrete clinging to his feet, and as he did, he heard it. Faint, distant, like a sound carried on the wind from a long way off. A child's laughter. It sounded just like Mark. Alex went still, every part of him listening. He tried to reason it away, the old pipes, the wind. But the sound had been too real. He strained to hear it again, but there was only the low rattle of the air conditioner. He crossed to the bathroom and pushed the door open. The floor inside was bone dry. He backed away slowly, his eyes scanning the little room. Nothing had moved. The damp patch on the floor was still there, but maybe he'd just been too tired to see it when he came in. The smell of chlorine was already fading, giving way again to the scent of dust. He was exhausted, his mind playing tricks on him. That's all it could be. He lay back on the thin mattress, but he kept his eyes open, staring at the ceiling, at the old water stains that looked like maps of places no one had ever been. And for the first time, he felt it. A pressure in the quiet. The feeling of being watched. An hour passed, maybe 2. Sleep was no longer an option. Every groan of the building, every sigh of the plumbing was a fresh tremor of fear. He decided then he couldn't stay. He didn't care about the money. He'd sleep in his car. He stood and reached for his jacket on the chair. When he turned back to the bed, he froze. The wall opposite him, where the cheap painting of a seascape had been, was gone. In its place was a wall covered in faded yellow wallpaper, patterned with small, smiling cartoon bears. His breath caught in his throat. It was the wallpaper from his bedroom when he was a child. He just stared, his mind unable to build a bridge to what he was seeing. He could even make out the small, clumsy scribble of his own name in green crayon near the baseboard. A relic of being 5 years old. It wasn't a dream. It felt too solid, too real. He took one slow step forward, reaching out a hand that trembled. He had to touch it, to prove it was a hallucination. As his fingers drew near, the air around the wall grew cold, and just before he could make contact, a voice moved through the room. "Alex, is that you, sweetheart?" It was his mother's voice. His mother, who had been gone for 10 years. A choked sound, half-sob, escaped him. He stumbled backward, hitting the small desk by the window. His mind felt like it was fracturing. He squeezed his eyes shut. "You're not real," he whispered into the impossible silence. "You're not real." When he opened them, the wallpaper was gone. The ugly seascape hung on the cracked plaster wall again. But the cold in the air remained, a pocket of unnatural chill. And the memory of her voice was a fresh wound. This wasn't his imagination. The motel was doing this. The building was reaching into his head and pulling out the things he had buried the deepest. He had to get out. He scrambled for the door, his hands shaking too much to work the lock properly. He finally wrestled the chain free, turned the knob, and threw the door open, lunging for the hallway. But the hallway wasn't there. There was only a solid, unmoving darkness, a void that seemed to drink the light from his room and give nothing back. He fell backward, the air knocked from his lungs, a prisoner. The motel had him. Panic, raw and absolute, took hold. He was in a cage, a predator, and it was still hungry. As if summoned by the thought, the room began to shift again. The smell of chlorine returned, stronger now, but mixed with something else. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and gasoline. The low hum of the air conditioner was swallowed by the deafening screech of tires on pavement. Then the sickening final sound of metal tearing itself apart. The lights flickered, and in the strobing flashes, the wall with the window dissolved. He wasn't looking at brick anymore. He was looking at the grill of a semi-truck, its headlights like two blazing suns, coming right for him. It was the last thing he'd seen in the accident, the crash that had taken his fiancée, Chloe. The sound was a physical thing, shaking the floor beneath him. Alex screamed, a raw, useless sound, and threw his arms over his face. He braced for the impact, for the pain he remembered so well. But it never came. Seconds stretched on, and the sound faded. The blinding light vanished. He slowly lowered his arms. The room was just a room again. The window was back, showing only the dark bricks outside. The air still carried the ghost of gasoline. His breaths were ragged, shallow. The motel was moving through his life, picking his tragedies like flowers. A childhood fear, a mother's ghost, a love lost in a moment of violence. And he knew, with a certainty that was colder than any fear he had yet felt, what it was saving for last. The one memory he had built his entire life around, outrunning. The temperature in the room dropped. Frost began to spiderweb across the window pane. The stained carpet beneath his feet softened, thickened, becoming the blue shag rug of his family's living room from 15 years ago. An old boxy television appeared against the far wall. A small pile of red and blue Lego bricks materialized in the center of the floor. Alex knew this place. He knew this silence. He knew the smell of lemon polish and the exact way the afternoon sun used to fall across this floor. "Can we build the spaceship now, Alex?" The voice was small. It came from right beside him. Alex turned his head, slowly. A sound of pure anguish caught in his throat. Sitting on the floor, holding a single red Lego, was a little boy with his own face, his own blue eyes. His brother, Leo, 6 years old. "Leo," Alex breathed, the name a broken thing. The little boy looked up at him, his face filled with a perfect, trusting innocence. "You promised," he said, holding out the brick, "before Mom and Dad get home." "I know," Alex whispered, tears blurring the impossible sight of his brother. "I know I did." He had been 14, in charge for 1 hour. They were building a spaceship. The phone rang. A friend. A video game. He told Leo to wait. Don't touch the new pieces. He was gone for 5 minutes. When he came back, the sliding glass door was open, and Leo was at the bottom of the pool. He hadn't even heard a splash. Now, in this cursed room, the memory was playing out in every torturous detail. The small boy on the floor stood up, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the television. The wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing the sun-drenched patio, the impossible blue of the swimming pool from his childhood home. "Leo, no!" Alex pleaded, scrambling to his feet. "Don't, please." The boy didn't seem to hear. He just walked toward the shimmering image of the backyard. "Leo, stop!" Alex screamed, lunging to grab him, but his hands passed through nothing, through cold air. This was the motel's real cruelty, not just to make him watch, but to make him helpless all over again. He could feel the room feeding on his despair, a vast and ancient awareness focusing on him, drawing strength from his agony. The image of Leo reached the edge of the phantom pool. He looked down into the water. Alex fell to his knees, sobbing. "I'm sorry," he cried out, the words torn from a place he'd kept locked away for 15 years. "Leo, I'm so sorry. It was my fault. I should have been watching. I'm so sorry." He covered his face, unable to see what he already knew. He waited for the sound of a memory that had haunted every quiet moment of his life, but it didn't come. After a long silence, he felt a small hand on his shoulder. He looked up. The specter of his brother was standing before him. The pool, the living room, it was all gone. It was just the boy in the center of the dusty motel room, and his expression was no longer blank. It was filled with a sad, impossible wisdom. And then he smiled. A small, forgiving smile. The moment he smiled, something in the room broke. A high, whining sound filled the air, and the walls seemed to vibrate. The suffocating presence that had been pressing in on Alex recoiled, as if it had touched fire. The motel fed on regret, on guilt. But in that whispered, broken confession, Alex had offered something else. Acceptance. Forgiveness. It was a frequency the place couldn't tune to. A light that scattered its particular darkness. The image of Leo began to fade. The red brick in his hand, the last thing to dissolve into the air. The shag carpet receded, revealing the stained floor beneath. The groaning of the walls went silent. The cold was gone. Alex was on his hands and knees in the middle of room 7, panting, drenched in sweat. The room was just a room again. Dirty, dilapidated, and blessedly ordinary. He looked at the door. The wall of darkness was gone. Through the opening, he could see the dimly lit hallway. He didn't think. He didn't grab his bag. He scrambled to his feet and ran. He fled down the corridor, through the office, and out into the pre-dawn quiet of the parking lot. He didn't look back. His hands, still shaking, found his keys. He threw himself into the driver's seat. The engine, dead for hours, turned over on the first try with a shudder. He slammed the car into reverse and tore out of the gravel lot, speeding onto the dark, empty highway. He drove until the sun began to rise, painting the horizon in soft colors. He finally risked a look in his rearview mirror. The road behind him was empty. There was no sign of a motel. It was as if it had been erased by the daylight. A wave of relief, so total and absolute, washed over him. It was over. He drove another 50 miles before pulling over to the side of the road, his body trembling. He rested his head against the steering wheel, just breathing in the silence. He was free. Then he glanced at the passenger seat. His heart went still. Sitting on the worn fabric, catching the first light of the new morning, was a single, small, red Lego brick. Have you ever been in a place that seemed to be listening? A room that held the echoes of all the lives that had passed through it? The line between the world and our own memory is thinner than we think. And sometimes in the quietest corners of the map, you can find a place that knows how to cross it. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like this video and subscribe. Until next time, stay safe out there.